Black helicopters hover over me. Global elite, that's all I see. Leave me alone, I just wanna be free. Glued to the TV, channel 10, maybe 16. Crazy shit going through my head, man, turn it off. I can't take it no more. New world order, global elite and this tyranny. Gotta get together, y'all. I have to say thank you to everybody at Access TV, Big Pokey, TrailerParkShow.com, MikeHansen.cc, that's my boy, I'll take a bullet for you. Chris Athanas, Alex Jones, I got the same love for you. RealityExpander.com, therefore I am, Infowars.com. Help me see the light, help me open my eyes. If it wasn't for you, I'd already be dead. Or on the evening news, get on these websites. It's time to get together, y'all. It's time to get together, y'all. Get ready for war.
Hello, I'd also like to thank you for allowing me into your homes for this 33rd revolution of Esoteric Science Roundtable. Excuse me. The subject for discussion this evening is the psychology of globalism. It is a vast subject, but I would like to touch upon some of the general points. I would like to thank Big Rob for allowing me to use his song, The New World Order, for intro for our show today. And rumor has it that Big Rob is in the kitchen currently cooking up a new recipe. So as soon as that is available to us, we will certainly offer you up a little taster, a little sample of what Big Rob has cooking currently. Again, I'd like to thank him for letting us use the rap, The New World Order, and I'd like to thank Chris Athanas for getting that copy to me so that I could make use of it this week. Now, the Big Rob is just one good example of having an understanding somewhat of the psychology of globalism and how he's able to use his God-given gifts of communication to bring this information out within the context or within a format that can get the message across to a larger group of people through his music. And I really have to commend him for using that avenue to pull that off, because he's doing quite a good job and, you know, getting the message out there in a real way, in a very powerful way. And I really have to commend him for the work that he's doing in that area. I'd like to say hey to Jeff Contreras, and cool shirt you were wearing last night on your show. I appreciate that. Also, Chris for wearing the shirt that I gave him with the logo for my show recently as well. I appreciate you guys giving me support in that respect. And would like to remind folks that tomorrow, on the 19th, at Opal Divines, we are having our philosophical meetings, our monthly philosophical meetings. Jeff Contreras and myself host the meetings. And they're from 8 o'clock on, and very casual, very laid back, and we discuss things that you hear us discuss on our television shows, and just really whatever is on someone's mind, we'll be willing to discuss and flesh out whatever topics. And so please come on down to Opal Divines tomorrow evening from 8 on, and that's at 700 West 6th Street at the intersection of 6th and West. And again, I would encourage everyone to come on down and take the opportunity to get together and share some of these views that a lot of us do have on these issues. Now again, getting back to the subject at hand, the psychology of globalism. To start, it is healthy to consider this from a dual standpoint, from a twofold standpoint. And that would be essentially from the basic splitting of that between matter and spirit, the material and the spiritual. And once we understand more so about how things are set up, we can find polarities like that, day and night, black and white, many different dichotomies that exist together, where there's a dual aspect, or in the sense of a magnet, where it has a positive and a negative aspect contained within one unit. Again, it's just an example of a duality. And that plays in very much to the whole idea of globalism, to the psychology of globalism, and how that whole plan is being carried out, if you will. Now, since psychology is essentially the study of mind and what man thinks, why he thinks the way that he does, again, we have to consider very carefully the mental aspect, or the mind, or the reasoning, the motive behind some of the activities that we see taking place on a global scale. As far as the state of mind, again, psychology being related to mind and the state of mind or the motivating factors that lead some of these so-called globalists to carry out some of the plans that they do carry out. And again, the thinking behind that. Now, certainly, members of certain groups, whether that be the Council on Foreign Relations, Bilderbergers, these types of groups, Trilateral Commission, there are those within those groups, and I really have to emphasize this, and the UN is the same for that matter too, that truly have altruistic motives. They truly do want to try to serve the race in some fashion, and they find that this is a way that they can serve it's in some fashion, that they can offer up their services and their expertise. And oftentimes, some of these people are not aware of the full picture, and we have to firmly keep that in mind as well, that not everyone is aware of the full picture that's a member of all of these organizations. And so some are aware at varying degrees, and it's just like the symbol that you see of the pyramid with a large base, and it gets smaller at the top because there's more general knowledge at the bottom, and it gets more specialized and refined the higher you get, and more exclusive in some respects and more elitist in some respects as well. Keeping that in mind, there are definitely goals, material goals, that are being, and programs that are being carried out by the group that I choose to term those that wish to enslave us. And again, some of these may be members of some of these organizations that I mentioned, and some of them may exist largely sight unseen from their high perches that they're able to move and shake behind the scenes without much notoriety, without much, without a whole lot of apparent getting back to what they actually are trying to accomplish, as far as people having a perception, a wide-scale perception behind the scenes to a certain degree. It's difficult to get a full grasp of that. And just to touch upon some of the everyday aspects of culture that have been infiltrated, and basically every aspect of human endeavor has been infiltrated and controlled and manipulated to some degree, some greater and some lesser. If we consider, to start, education, certainly in the education system, we see that there is a deliberate program that is being carried out, that's being implemented to come up with what some would term a contemporary community standard. They want the kids to think and act and behave a certain way, and so they're going to try to mold them within what they feel would be acceptable contemporary community standards. And so someone has an ideal at some level that they try to impose and implement on the young minds and try to mold them at an early age. And so some of the people that have been instrumental in bringing out some of that information would be like Charlotte Iserbeets with the website Deliberate Dumbing Down, and she goes into great detail as to at what level, how intense that this system is, and how pervasive it is, how much of a wide scale the education system is being manipulated to achieve certain means. Again, to get children to think a certain way, to program them in a certain way, if you will, to try to get them more so to be little snitches, I guess is probably not an inaccurate word, to rat out for money with the DARE programs and things like that. Also, a thing I'd like to get into with, as far as the educational system, there was a program that was started a number of years ago, and I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but Colin Powell was associated with it, and this was a nationwide program among youth as far as trying to encourage them to get into volunteerism. And they're trying to get into a mandatory volunteerism. Now, certainly those two words, that's a definite contradiction in terms right there. If you think about mandatory, which means you have to do it, you're obligated to do it, it's a must, you have to do it, you're mandated to do it, or the idea of volunteering. Volunteering is something that you give of yourself. It has to be of your will, of your own free will, that you want to give something of yourself, that you want to volunteer. For someone to impose a mandatory volunteerism, that again is an oxymoron, or it's a type of dichotomy that does not really make sense. Those two words don't fit together. They're opposite words, and so to try to put them together into this catchphrase of mandatory volunteerism is very misleading, and if these types of programs are going to be conducted to where they're happening during the school hours and kids are getting credit for this type of thing, maybe I can understand it a little bit more. And certainly kids that are being forced to be part of these programs are going to buy being involved in these things, whether it's of their own will or not. They may somehow still get something out of it in some way. They may still gain something, some greater understanding, some greater awareness. But again, the key is volunteering. If one has the will that they want to volunteer, that's one thing. But if you're forced to volunteer, then it is not truly volunteerism, and that's a key point I'd like to make as far as that aspect of it. And certainly as far as the textbooks, we find what's put in the textbooks is not always accurate. There are many errors, and that's been going on for years and years and years, that we hear about how many errors are constantly put in and kept into the textbooks that the public schools use. Now, in the sense of media, the arts, and culture, we find very much too through what movies are being put into production. Now, it does not, a movie is something that takes several years from the very inception. I mean, somebody has to write a screenplay, first of all, an idea, and then has to go from there and turn into a movie. So this is not an overnight process by any stretch of the imagination. It's a multi-year, it's at least a 2-year at the very minimum for your lower budget, then on up, depending, for getting these movies out. So when you see movies with a certain theme, and you see groupings of movies come out simultaneously, like with a war theme, for instance, very patriotic, these movies were in production several years ago, and so that's something we have to keep firmly in mind, that why is it that these movies were being produced at this point in time several years ago, timed, if you will, to come out right coincident with certain events, for instance 9/11, and that we get this whole rash, this insurgency of patriotic movies that obviously have been in the works for some time, years back, that all of a sudden are hitting the mainstream right around this time. And so that's something to consider as well, how through the media and certainly through advertising. I used to do work with audio for ads and that sort of thing, and so if you can understand how much time and effort is spent on trying to sell you something, trying to convince you that you need to have a certain thing and that you just cannot live without it. If people really knew the mass psychology as far as that as well, as far as how much time, trouble, effort, and energy is put into trying to sell us things and trying to convince us and condition us that we need certain things in our lives desperately, that it might surprise some people. Also, with religion, certainly there's been much manipulation through religion, and that is relatively apparent to many people, that certain individual religions are going to prop themselves up at the expense of other religions. We're the best, we're this, we're that, your religion is false, our religion is the only true way, and then you get into the divisiveness of this, and certainly we see that fleshed out between the Catholics and the Protestants in Ireland, most assuredly through the Jews and the Palestinians, or those that follow Islam and those that follow the Jewish faith. And we see these things propped up and perpetuated. And most assuredly there are programs behind the scenes to help perpetuate this divisiveness, this wrangling, and this fighting that continues to go on a global scale, and that we continue to have the fallout and the after effects from in our culture. Now, as far as the economic system, certainly many of us are aware of that, and Chris Athanas and other folks go into great detail about our money system and how it is a debt money system. It's a false money system, if you will, that also was leached upon us in the dead of the night, really, for all intents and purposes, and that this has been implemented, and the IRS for that matter too. Those two things are kind of two parts of one whole in a lot of respects, and how this money system has been put upon us that really is a debt money system that you can never get ahead through this type of system, with there being what's called fractal lending, and to get into that it would take a long time, and hopefully some people are at least somewhat familiar with the fact that the economic system that we have is not a true economic system. It's a false system that's enslaving us really through the economic means, through this paper money that's printed out that's truly worthless. Also, trust. There are many trusts in the world, and if we follow the activities of the trust, the various trusts, and what they are getting involved in, what do they finance, and what are their motives, and what are their mission statements, and that sort of thing, we can find out a whole lot in that respect too, because there are many trusts, and there are also living trusts. In the instance of Bill Gates, he has a living trust so that he can oversee during his lifetime what projects, his billions of dollars that are tucked away and kept away from the tax, any kind of tax implications. He can keep this billions of dollars set aside and tucked away so that he can, through his trust, use it for whatever. And there are many examples of trust throughout history. And they generally have agendas, and we can track back and find what these agendas are. And also in the church coffers, there's gob of money. Money essentially is like concretized or crystallized energy. And it really, in order for it to, there's plenty of money. It's just kind of locked up in these handful of places. Again, in the banking system, trust, church coffers, and some of the wealthiest people. Again, just a very small percentage of the population has a vast majority of wealth. And so that being the case, if we can act upon in a mental way, in a thinking way, in a selfless way, with the ideas of service in mind, then we can move that crystallized energy with greater energy, and we can put it into circulation, if you will. We can get that crystallization liquefied and flowing, and then this economic system can be a living, vibrant entity, and we can all partake of it. We can all thrive as a result of the good positive flow. Right now, there's so much congestion in this crystallized money system that it's congealed and congested in just a small area of the body politic, and just that small area is able to make use of this health and vitality, if you will, that is our economic system, faulty as it is, while the rest of the body suffers. And that is inexcusable. There's plenty of money, there's plenty of resources, it's just a matter of proper distribution. And that has to come through a willingness to want to understand how we can take back control of, again, economics, all of these areas. And there are different social programs as well, that the welfare to work and things like that. And I've mentioned these on my show previously, but it's good to tie into this discussion on the psychology of globalism today. And that there are many social programs that initially maybe they might be able to help people out a bit, but they tend to become enslaving. They tend to keep people down, trapped within the system where they have to do certain things to get their little piddly handout. They basically have to sell their soul just to get a little chump change thrown at them, and they think that, oh, I don't have to work, I'm doing good, I'm getting all this for myself. But in actuality, they're limiting themselves so much by forcing themselves to have to, play by the rules to get your little handout, to get your little dole out. And if that's how you want to live, that's certainly your prerogative. But in my estimation, that's very limiting to have to depend on somebody to come hand you out whatever you need, whether it's for housing, food, all the basic needs. It's unfortunate the way that those things have been turned around, if you will. And also, I've mentioned before polls, the idea of polls. We see polls often, and as to the accuracy, I often question, and who is polled? I know one friend that was polled after the 9/11 attacks. KVU News, I believe, called him in his workplace and work environment and asked, should we go and attack Afghanistan? And he was like, no. Heck no. No, absolutely not, because he has more of an understanding of the larger picture. And so, you don't really hear too much about these polls. And they tend to basically just keep us enslaved and keep us in fear if we feel that, 85% of the people support this war on terror, and you're thinking, well, hey, I don't support this war on terror. Where is this 85% of the population that's blindly following what our leaders tell us as far as who we should attack next and who is a terrorist? That has much concern for me. These fear tactics are very much psychologically motivated and put in place to keep us uncertain, confused, and separated. The ideas of us coming together and thinking together, just like Big Rob says, got to get together, y'all. It's just that simple. Get past the racial things, get past the political correctness, because that is a big divide right there. That is a big psychological programming tool that is being used to divide us further and further by us having to call a particular ethnicity by some made-up name that didn't probably likely come from that ethnicity. Somebody attached that name to them, like, for instance, African American. I don't really believe a black person came up with that term. I may be mistaken about that, but those are the kind of things that keep us divided, in my estimation. And we have to get past this little piddly race things, not really race, ethnicity, because there is only one race, which is the human race. And that is something that's very key to keep in mind, too, if we want to move together collectively. Now, certainly, we do have a war on terror, and that has been very well publicized, and anybody that's not aware of that, they must have been hibernating for the past couple of years. But as far as the war on terror, there is a definite psychological aspect of this war on terror that's very carefully crafted. But then, on the other hand, there is an information war that the man on the streets is waging, and they're kind of coming to a head here. It's kind of like a big storm, or two fronts are meeting, cold and warm, and there's going to have to be some kind of a storm, some kind of precipitation resulting from that. And so, again, there's a war on terrorism right now. Who is a terrorist? Well, pretty much anybody's a terrorist until proven otherwise, anywhere on the globe, and that's something that we have to keep in mind in this unceasing, never-ending, possibly generational war on terror, this war unending that's going to possibly keep on going on and on. Now, if any of you caught Alex Jones's last live show this past Thursday, he did take the time to mention that he will not be doing his Access show after a couple of months. So in a couple of months from now, he's going to be taking a hiatus from just the Access aspect. He'll continue to do his radio show, and he'll continue to he's continuing with writing a book. He's going to finish a book, and so he's got other projects, and also doing the documentaries, these nice polished documentaries that are making a big impact on a larger scale. And also just all the projects that he's involved in, I can understand his reasoning for that. So you're not going to see Alex Jones sitting at this table after a couple of months in this studio that I broadcast from. But he did say that he was confident that he thought some of these other folks down here that are doing shows are going to be able to pick up the slack. And I feel very confident in a lot of these shows down here in Access that they are doing wonderful work, bringing out a lot of key vital information. And hopefully we won't miss a beat. Certainly Alex Jones will probably show up as a guest on different shows from time to time, but I can respect his decision to want to take a little bit of time off, but still being very active just in other areas. And also that the whole war on terror versus the information war ties in a lot to the theme of our show, essentially, which is enlightenment versus enfrightenment. The concept that we hope to, in some small way, enlighten people, bring people to a larger reality, provoke them, at least to some degree, to think. Provoke them to think, and possibly, maybe, at some level, even inspire them to consider in their own lives what they may be able to do with their own abilities, their own inherent qualities and capacities, that they can make a change in this whole war on terrorism, or this enlightenment versus enfrightenment. Now, certainly we're still hearing things about prior knowledge about the 9/11 event, and that's still unraveling here and there. There is much damage control and much spin that's being used to manipulate and try to put that in the proper perspective. But we still hear the mantra over and over again: terrorist attack on American soil, not a matter of if but when. Not a matter of if but when. Not a matter of if but when. I mean, they just parrot it over and over and over again. You know, the redundancy is purposeful, because that, again, is a psychology of this. These key words and key phrases that are used, catchy little phrases like 911, these little catchphrases that are used in order to stick in our minds, because we have such a short attention span that it's difficult for us to sometimes hone in on some certain things. And so simple things like 911 do stick in our minds, and so we're able to, it just locks in on us, and so it's there, and we can't get past it. And we hear many people in politics that are talking about this inevitable attack. They seem convinced that this attack is inevitable. Members of Congress and different various talking heads that you hear saying this with confidence. Dick Cheney, for instance, people in high positions that say with full faith and confidence that yes, we're going to have another attack. Now, if they are so confident, so assured of this fact, they know it's going to come to fruition for sure. What do they know that we don't know? You know, what are they hiding? They obviously must know something, because they are so confident when they make this statement. Not a matter of if but when. So certainly there must be some knowledge. And again, that leads me to believe that this is a larger program, a psychological warfare program, and also a larger program to, again, keep us fearful, keep us manipulated. Now, certain things are causing these timetables to shift and to be altered. And I would say the documentaries that have been coming out, Anthony J. Hilder's documentary, Illuminati 911, and Alex Jones's videos, 911, The Road to Tyranny, Part 1 and 2, those kind of videos are coming out, and they're really, really convincing people of the validity of some of this information, and they're really causing the globalists, or those that wish to enslave us, to change and alter their timetables. And so these timetables that they have had in place for some time, that they feel like, the way things are going, they can kind of see, what's happening. And so they kind of are anticipating how to head us off at the pass, if you will. But these timetables are being more so and more so altered, and so that they're having to compensate and redirect their efforts to try to counter some of these efforts again through some of these documentary films and some of these larger efforts, because it's harder and harder to keep things hidden these days. More things are coming out and more things are apparent, and so we're finding these things, again, more readily being made accessible to the average person. And so the average person in the streets is getting this information a lot faster and is thinking about these things a bit more because they see prior evidence. They see evidence from beforehand. One quick thing I want to mention as well that is key to this whole thing is the Second Amendment. We have the Second Amendment in this country. Basically, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You can make yourself aware of the entire saying, but if you're just familiar with the idea of the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, period, that is the gist of it. That is the bulk of that amendment, and that is the important aspect of it for us. If you want to continue to wave your freak flag high and continue to do the things you do, lead the lifestyle that you do, be the type of person that you want to do, if you enjoy who you are, enjoy your so-called free lifestyle, then you need to understand, it would be very crucial for you to understand and appreciate how important guns are, and the Second Amendment in particular is in this country. It's very much under attack, and that's also part of this whole psychological warfare conditioning thing that we're taught that the ammunition and guns and ammunition and all that sort of thing are bad. Again, it's just like anything. It's a tool, and it all depends on motive. You can just as easily kill somebody with a car or any other thing, so that's not a very good argument in my estimation. Now, as far as the attitude of mind that would be helpful for us to engender and to keep up, if we could maintain a vigilant, battle-ready state of mind and to kind of just be aware as much as possible. That does not mean to be frightened and to be intimidated and to have a feeling like you have to watch your back all the time and be nervous. Don't take that kind of an attitude. Just be more aware and have a confident awareness. If you can have some confidence in your awareness and having a vigilant state of mind and being, again, battle ready, that state of mind will carry any person far as being aware of what's going on and educating themselves and trying to put themselves in a position, if they so choose, to act in their own environment to help alleviate some of the suffering, help bring some helping to the race. Now, I would like to bring out now the spiritual aspect and try to get into this quickly as much as I can. The spiritual definitely ties in. Again, I spoke earlier about the dichotomy, the duality, the spirit and matter. We are both, we're spirit and matter. And so with the spiritual aspect, you see that those that wish to enslave us have their own brand of spirituality based on a very old form of magic that's based on ritual and ceremonial magic that is very antiquated, very outdated, and no longer valid in this time, but they still hold on to it and maintain it and use it because they use this means to enslave us. And this is their method whereby they are able on a large scale to keep the power that they've amassed. Now, you may not out there in TV land tend to believe that that is the case, but really it ultimately matters what they believe. And rest assured, they do believe that this is a valid practice, or they wouldn't have gone through the trouble to perpetuate this means, this ritual and ceremonial exercises. And just to give you an example, I want to get into the symbolism aspect now. If you are familiar with the documentary Illuminati 911, there's a gentleman, Jordan Maxwell, who shows a picture for when you see the president addressing Congress. On either side of him, you'll see some sticks bound with an axe handle on either side. Now, these bound sticks with the axe handle that you see on either side of this president as he's speaking are called fasci, fasci from fascism. These are symbols that we borrowed directly from the Nazi regime some 60 years ago. And also, if you look beside the two fasci, where you see the president speaking, you'll also see a spiraling cane sort of situation with an eagle on the top, with spread wings that's at the top of this spirally looking twisted cane, and that also sits in a very prominent place between the two fasci. And that also is borrowed from the Nazi symbolism. And for us to not be aware of that is, to me, a complete travesty. There was a mere 60 years ago that some of the worst hell on earth, came into being, and just a mere 60 years later, we've forgotten about it. We've forgotten about the symbolism. And those that have eyes to understand symbolism will have a big time leg up on understanding the motives and the goals and the workings behind the scenes of those that wish to enslave us. There is a definite program, and there is a definite ritual and ceremonial aspect to it. And once you understand more about ritualism and ceremonial order, then you can see the movings and the shakings, and you can understand where their next move is going to lie. Now, I'd like to get into a little bit about the information that Alex Jones was able to bring out through his Bohemian Grove video. This is very key, and this is really the main gist of what I want to get into this evening, this one little blurb that's key to this whole thing. The Bohemian Grove incident that took place, Alex Jones and Mike Hansen were able to sneak into, in Northern California, to Sonoma County, into an area where there is a ceremony that takes place. There's a huge stone owl and men dressed in these black and white ceremonial robes. They have a ceremony where a bound body is carried on a little raft down a stream, kind of like the death and the river Styx, if you're familiar with mythology. And then this bound body, this cremation of care, is cremated. This body is cremated. It's called the cremation of care, and is burned and offered as a sacrifice, if you will. Now, as to whether there's a real person burned or not, I tend to think that it was, not real, because the handful of people that I do know that have smelled burning flesh say you will never forget it. And if indeed there was flesh burning, I think that it would have been very apparent to those in proximity of that ceremony taking place. Now, this is just the outer ritual. This is just the outer ceremonial that Alex and Mike were able to sneak into and were able to bring footage out from in order to bring it out to the mainstream. And also keeping in mind that this footage was also used for a BBC documentary as well that used a lot of the footage and brought out a lot of this information in a kind of watered down, more mild fashion. Now, also to tie this in on a larger scale, Alex had brought out this documentary information. He had made some waves, and then there started showing up down here at Access these little comics, these little very highly polished comics from the Phantom Patriot. This Phantom Patriot was this superhero comic guy. He kind of was a mix of the Punisher and Captain America. He had this really cool superhero outfit, and he was fighting these guys with the black ski masks and what have you, and he was fighting the New World Order and putting out these really cool polished comics that Alex had shown on his show. The Common Sense guys had taken the time to show on their show, and they were giving this guy some praise and props, if you will, for the little comics. I myself was watching on Halloween when News 8 Austin showed their live footage, and lo and behold, there was a gentleman dressed in a very cool-looking costume. This looked like a prop from a movie set. This costume this gentleman was wearing, this Phantom Patriot outfit, again, kind of like Captain America and the Punisher, was a nice costume. It looked like something from a movie lot. It did not absolutely nowhere near look like something that someone would have put together on their own. This is something that someone put a lot of effort into, and that particular individual, I question as to whether he really put together the comics or the costume, because it was really a lot of effort went into this. So this same Phantom Patriot guy, very shortly afterwards, ends up in Sonoma County, California, to the Bohemian Grove area, and he goes in there with a crossbow and some other weapons, and then he's finally, corralled by the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department. And he's yelling Alex Jones and all this kind of stuff, and so there's this big fiasco as a result. Now, what resulted from that incident was that there was a bi-coastal hit, if you will, placed on Alex Jones through the media. And what took place was in a large, prominent New York paper, I believe it was the New York Times, if I'm not mistaken, and then in a large West Coast paper, they simultaneously put out articles about this phantom patriot guy about what the incident that took place with this raving lunatic that was apprehended, shouting about Alex Jones and the New World Order. They mentioned him, and they mentioned the Bohemian Grove information that Alex brought out. And even that, they still spoke about it in a speculative manner. Now, this is something key to bring out, because this is an area where much damage was done and much spin had to be involved. A big, large-scale spin campaign took place in order to amend and try to right what damage was done. And this is something that I don't even know if Alex Jones realizes the full magnitude of him bringing this information out. Now, if anybody is understanding of symbolism and understanding of the idea of the occult simply means hidden. I could have very easily called my show Occult Science Roundtable as opposed to Esoteric Science Roundtable, but that word has been demonized largely through those that wish to enslave us. They make use of those means, and they don't want you to be able to have access to occult science or hidden knowledge, if you will. And so they hoard it, or they make it out to be very bad, very evil, Luciferic, of the devil exclusively. And that, again, is a psychological programming to keep you away from it, to keep you frightened, and to say, oh, I don't want to mess with that. You're playing with fire. You'd be a fool to try to study the occult or question anything. And it's always those that have questioned authority that have gained some inroads, that have made progress, that have made real change. And for us not to question, to me, is foolishness. We have to question at all turns all of these things. Now, certainly, two major newspapers are not going to simultaneously put out an article on this little insignificant incident if there wasn't more significance to it. Again, keeping in mind there's always an inner and an outer ritual, or an inner and an outer teaching. Even through Christianity, Jesus himself spoke of an inner and an outer teaching. And it's valid at all levels. And we can apply that to many different areas of human endeavor, where there will be an inner teaching and an outer teaching. And this is very much the case with Bohemian Grove. Alex Jones and Mike Hansen were only able to capture footage from the outer ritual. This is what the general public is allowed to be invited to. Granted, the so-called elite, to a certain degree, certain segment of the population that is allowed to come in to indulge in this ritual and be a part of the ceremony, part of a good old boys network in a way, if you will, that they're only seeing the outer ritual. They may very well think that they are seeing the full enchilada, that they're getting everything here, and that's very much in the case with Masonry too. Many Masons feel that they've been in it for a few years and they feel they have some level of understanding, but in actuality there are much higher levels that they may never attain for whatever reason. This is very much tying in with that as well, that there are the outer and the inner rituals. Now, the inner ritual is what is the fear. The fear of the inner ritual being exposed is really at the core of all of this hit, if you will, of this mass campaign to smear Alex Jones for bringing out the Bohemian Grove, information. At any rate, the smear campaign, because it's okay, all politicians and people of prominence, in many instances, have a skeleton or skeletons in the closet that those that wish to enslave us are aware of. In the instance of a Gary Condit, for instance, he obviously upset somebody and tried to go against the grain, and so Chandra Levy came out of the closet all of a sudden, and that took place, and he's no longer a member of Congress as a result, and they destroyed him. In essence, I can't imagine him being able to have much of any kind of public life after this incident took place. And whether it's that you're a cross-dresser or whatever the case may be, those are the light things, and those are things that people can identify with, or they can understand and accept to a certain degree, because we can grasp greed and selfishness and materialism to a certain degree. Now, at the inner level, the level that we can't readily grasp because we just don't have the capacity to think in these terms, fortunately for us. But to get your mind wrapped around the whole idea that the inner aspect, the aspect that we would not see filmed, or that Alex Jones would have had tremendous difficulty sneaking footage from, would involve actual ritual sacrifice of likely small babies, young girls, young children. There are many children that disappear in our country, and even there was information that came out through this Nebraska savings and loans scandal that's tied into all this, and this is very, very tied in at many levels. It has a lot of different levels that that make up this whole thing, as far as the child nabbing, the mind control that takes place, and how these children are programmed to compromise our politicians and people in places of prominence. If they're offered sex with these young children and they go for it, they indulge themselves, there's likely going to be some footage of it, or there's going to be some proof. There's going to be some proof that is going to crop up at some point in time. It may stay tucked away for a long time, but when it's time to have the boogeyman come out, if that person is not playing by the rules, if they're not going with the party line, their particular skeleton is going to be placed in a place of prominence, and those individuals will likely go down in shame. Now, that being the case, people can identify at some level to just your basic run-of-the-mill selfishness and materialism that most of our politicians and many people of prominence exercise and indulge in. They are material people by and large, and so they're going to indulge their lower natures as much as possible. That's part of the perk of their prominent place of power, and so they're going to run with it. What they don't want you to know about is the inner ritual. They don't want you to know about the inner ritual of the sacrifice, the black mass rituals, if you will, that take place. The inner rituals. These are what they don't want you to find out about. These are the things that are going to cause them great trauma, they're going to put them at a great disadvantage, because if this were more emphasized, they would really have to be back on their heels, reeling from this blow, and they would really have to, again, restructure their timetables more so and more so. And this is something that I would like to bring out in context of the larger picture, because this is something that could really be keyed in on to really, really expose a larger portion of this whole reality, and that could really, it could bring out some information and implicate certain individuals, that sort of thing, that would really cause people to open their eyes somewhat and understand how comprehensive, how ingrained this whole system is, this use of this ritual and ceremonial magic for selfish and material ends that is those at the very highest levels, those that wish to enslave us, practice in these occult rituals, this black mass ritual, and they do indeed. It's a blood ritual. It's a blood sacrifice ritual, and they eat their own as much as they would, sacrifice a small baby without any question of conscience whatsoever. These folks don't operate from the level of conscience. They don't have a conscience operating for all intents and purposes, and so they can, with free rein, run around and wreak havoc and have no consequences in their minds for their actions. They feel like they have a God-given right, a birthright, if you will. And again, there are also generational Satanists, too, that have come up through corporations and what have you. And we find that those individuals are propped up a lot of times in certain positions of prominence because they are part of a generational satanic family, and so they find their way into places of power. Now again, keeping in mind this whole idea of occult science or esoteric science, the motive is what comes into factor largely. The means in many ways are the same. It comes down to motive. What are you trying to accomplish by exercising, by using this ritual, this routine, or this ceremonial practice? That is the key to try to determine that. And again, there is jockeying for position, two opposing factions in essence, black magic versus white magic at the highest levels, if you will, and that is what's perpetuating on our material plane a lot of what's going on. And if you can understand, again, symbolism, it's key to understand symbolism. If you can make a study of symbolism, you'll see more so and more so why things are done when they're done in a specific ritual and ceremonial order. It's very important to those that wish to enslave us to operate and exercise, because that's part of the ritual, that's part of their gaining power. They gain power through ritual, timetables, through ceremony. And so if they don't act within the rigid accord of the ceremony, they're not going to get the end result that they're hoping for. And that's the key thing. They want to try to enslave us, and they want to, they're not going to be able to get that result if we're able to understand where they're coming from, and then we can counter and see what their next move is by an understanding of symbolism. I would like to go ahead and take a couple of calls and see what's going on this evening. Hello, caller.
Yeah, hello.
Good. How are you? Good. I'm doing good. How are you?
Pretty good. I just had a question. Do you think Chandra Levy might have been a victim of one of those ritual sacrifices?
Well, I don't know if you happened to catch Common Sense a couple of weeks
Yeah,
ago.
with Tex Mars.
Tex Mars, exactly. Well, I hadn't really completely considered that at that point, but when he brought that information out, it really hit home. Because if you understand, again, symbolism, Washington, D.C. is set up.
Yeah.
The whole laying out of that area is...
like that park.
Right.
There's actually like a goat head.
Right, or
the,
a Baphomet, or
owl is
an
in
inverted star, right.
And like the Congress building is like shaped like the owl if you look at the street layout.
Right, and it's not just something like you have to squint your eyes or something like that. I've seen those layouts emphasized, and there is a lot of validity to that.
David Icke actually did a show on that, I saw.
You know what, I think I may have seen that as well. That's a good point, too.
And also, I was just like kind of wondering why would these, I mean, how did this come about, this Order of the Light, or you know, years ago when these Illuminati got this belief that...
Well, okay, look at it this way. There have always been so-called secret societies. I mean, from the day, well, not from the day, but very shortly after we gained self-consciousness, we became man, if you will. There have been those that have been guiding the race behind the scenes, if you choose to consider that.
Yeah, well, Tex Mars, he kind of like laid it out, like I understood it a little bit more when he said that a lot of them believed that God was enslaving man, and that by Satan telling them to eat from the tree of knowledge, he was actually our savior, by, you know, getting our minds from being enslaved by God.
I understand that too, and that is kind of that's a little sketchy in a certain way because of the idea of illuminating oneself.
Yes.
We had to take in that Luciferic quality to rebel and bring that quality into us. I mean, that Luciferic quality, if you will, is what fired and fueled our American Revolution back in the 1700s. That quality is in us, but we have to find balance, and the key to find the balance is through Christ. Christ is the balance between Luciferic and another force called Ahrimanic. Those are the two forces that keep us away from the truth and away from a spiritual divine centering, if you will. They pull us either towards the dense material with the Ahrimanic or towards the enlightened, the Luciferic knowledge, the illuminated aspects. So there's a balance between that, and that is through Christ that we can find that balance.
All right, man. Well, thanks
Thank you
for letting me on the show, man.
Not a problem. Thanks. Have a nice evening. But that is important to keep in mind that the secret societies have been around a long, long time. And when you can understand ritualism and symbolism now, even to the level of when you see Congress with their lapel pins, or in some cases you see some of these women wearing these very gaudy brooches, very gaudy brooches that are symbolic of something. That's something key to keep in mind as well. These people do these things for a reason in many instances. And also with NASA, with the ritual and ceremony that they use, the occult symbolism that they use is very evident in a lot of things. And they use ritualism and symbolism with the launch dates, for instance. If you pay any attention, and I would encourage those to pay attention from now on if you haven't, they will always scrub the launch dates for some reason. These reasons vary. They're very widely varying reasons, but they're very creative as well. But they all just don't really ring true for whatever reason to me personally. And there is always, invariably, without exception, an excuse for why the launch can't go on time. And so they're going to scrub it for another day. Optimum weather, seal blew out, this line is leaking, whatever the case may be. It's always something different. But really what it boils down to is they choose to launch ritually and ceremonially. And so they want to launch when astrological conditions are right and certain things are right. They take that opportunity to launch at that point. And that's very key in understanding the movings and shakings at the highest levels of NASA, because that very much ties into this old occult knowledge, this old ritual and ceremonial that they've been holding on to for thousands of years, that's been keeping them in power through this practice. And they throw it in our face more and more so now. And if you can begin to understand the symbolism, you can follow that thread and find, the origin. What is the origin of this, and what is the motivating factor behind all of this? What's the deal with NASA? Why are they doing what they're doing? Even with the alleged sacrifice of the 7 crew members of the Challenger, where they had the first civilian citizen on board, the teacher Krista McAuliffe. There's been talk that disaster, the Challenger disaster of '87, was a ritual sacrifice, if you will. The number 7 being very important and crucial in any kind of occult work. Again, that's number 7 it's a neutral number, but it just depends on motive as to what you're going to use this number 7 for, and that's something to keep in mind as well. Also with the alien connection thing too, we do have the technology to fool the people, to bring down some sort of imaginary alien attack, and that could take place in the future. And right now I've been seeing more ads that emphasize UFOs and aliens and things like that. I mean, they're always kind of are there in the mainstream, and they have been for a number of years, but you're going to see it more so and more so, more prominently, I feel, displayed. So keep an eye out for more ads about aliens and UFOs and things like that, because they have to counter and they have to put their spin programs into place just in case they want to either crop up some kind of alien intervention thing to drum up some kind of alien intervention scenario, which they may well do. They very much have the technology. We very much have the anti-gravity propulsion systems in some of our crafts that we can, you know, hum around and let enough people see them that people will be like, oh, look, UFOs, UFOs, when in actuality they're our own military craft. And so again, the idea of black magic versus white magic. There is definitely black magic versus white magic at the highest levels. The more we can understand the symbolism, and if we can choose to educate ourselves somewhat, we can see, and you don't have to be a serious occult student. You just have to have a general grasp of symbolism to understand the next move that's coming down the pike and where they plan to go, or how they may be forced to restructure, to rearrange their plans in an event of damage control, which we see happening more so and more so. They really didn't anticipate, the globalists or those that wish to enslave us, didn't really anticipate the unraveling this early on, and this information, this flood of enlightenment that's really taken place lately, this renaissance of information that's come down the pike lately. They didn't anticipate it coming into the minds and hearts and men's the way that it has, and so they're having to counter to deal with that. And I'd like to again give credit to the other awareness shows on this network that are bringing this information out. Everybody's got a little different piece of the pie. We're all trying to bring it out and give you something that you can make practical use from, and maybe, again, inspire you to consider in your own lives what you might be able to do to help this whole scenario along for, again, the helping of the race. I'm going to go ahead and grab another call quickly. Hello, caller.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I have a question.
Go ahead.
What do you see as the role of art, music, psychedelics, etc., in the redemption of the human race?
Well, I would say that I did a show a while back on the spiritual revolution in music, and that the psychedelic movement of the 60s did bring in a more open, if you will, environment. Sure, you've got negative aspects of the counterculture too, but in a large way, it opened up people's minds, it opened up people's perceptions, and it opened up people's thinkings. Now, as far as art, it has the same power. It has the power to open and inspire, or to enfrighten, to make you fearful. It really depends on each individual how they're going to perceive something. Now, again, with the media and like with polls, advertising, the plots that are written into the network programming, these are all carefully crafted in many instances, and they're crafted with a purpose, with an agenda behind them to make us think a certain way, or to program us with a certain idea that gets us subliminally. It gets us generally subliminally, and they're able to do that. And you'll see themes. If you can watch the themes on the evening news, on the magazine, like for instance, Time, Newsweek, and those magazines, a lot of times they have the same cover story. You see across the board a program to emphasize certain points at certain times, and the media and art, in some instances, are ways to do that. But also, media and art, by the same token, can be used to enlighten and bring about change. Like in the instance of the rap that I played at the intro, Big Rob, The New World Order. Basically just saying, hey, we got to get together, y'all. Understand your enemy, understand this dilemma, and understand, hey, we can get together. Big Rob, he wouldn't say, I'd take a bullet for Mike Hansen for no reason. You know what I mean? He has a level of understanding that, hey, it's not a racial thing, it's not an ethnic thing. We are all in this boat together, and we can through art or through the media, in the sense of that I'm doing this show and many others are doing shows, try to inform people as much as possible and allow people like yourselves to ask questions and get your views out to the public as well.
Well, what I'm talking about is redemption.
Mm-hmm.
breaking away from the fear, breaking away from the programming. You know, I guess television plays an important role.
Well, again, I'm going to have to let you go because I have a few more callers and I have very little time. But it's a dual thing with television, for instance. It really, it just depends on how you choose to perceive it. If you don't have a certain level of awareness, and even a certain level of spirituality is really key in this information war or this Enlightenment versus Enfrightenment campaign. That certain level of spirituality is key to help you wade through and have some level of discernment, some level of being able to see who's zooming whom, to have that capacity, because otherwise you might be overwhelmed. There's a lot of negativity in the news, and it's good not to be overwhelmed by it.
Hello?
Hello, caller?
Hi.
Oops, I think I have two people. Sorry. Go ahead, caller. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, you're there. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. You were talking earlier about a superhero incident in regards to the whole Alex Jones media blitz.
Right.
And you had said something about the unidentified superhero. Something about like his outfit. It was too professional to be.
Right. See, I actually, with my own eyes, saw on News 8 Austin during Halloween the Phantom Patriot. This guy was in this costume running. He's the same guy that dropped off these little comics down here at Access that those guys were showing on their shows. And he had a very polished looking outfit. It looked, I mean, because I used to live in Los Angeles. I used to work in the industry, if you will, doing for a recording studio and doing audio post-production. And so, you know, I've been around that environment for 5 years when I lived in Los Angeles. And that costume the guy had was way too polished. He did not put that thing together himself, and he didn't put those comics together himself, in my estimation. I just can't see it, because the whole thing, the way it ties in with him going out there to Bohemian Grove and saying Alex Jones, and all this stuff, and them arresting him, and then them simultaneously writing a couple of articles in mainstream, really large, well-respected mainstream newspapers to counter or to bring up, not really counter, but to bring up and try to throw a certain light, a certain agenda on the whole Bohemian Grove thing.
Okay, well, the only reason I ask is I kind of consider myself a superhero. I have an outfit. I've been known to travel around Midtown Austin, and kind of the idea is I'm curious in regards to your ideas as the superhero approach as revolutionary, the idea of revolution with, you know, being started by a superhero. I mean, is it possible in your estimation for careful approaches of like local superheroes to become revolutionary?
Well, let me go ahead and answer your question off the air. I'll let you go. I don't have much time left, but
No, I'm serious.
well, no, I will take you seriously, and I will answer your question off air.
Well, I don't have a lot of time. I just
okay. Well, you seem to be the only one left there. I don't have much time either, but I would just say that really, I don't really like to emphasize the individual effort so much. I like to emphasize the group effort. That, you know, again, what Alex Jones says, many hands make light work. Certainly, if that's your particular avenue, then I would say exploit it at all ends, you know, to the utmost. And if you feel that you can do something constructive out of it, by all means, go for it. You very well may. You may, because one person can do a lot of work, but when you have one person here, one person here, one person here, one person here doing various things, and you're going to have a large-scale, you know, enlightenment, if you will. And so it's very possible that you can do something in that respect. I don't know what your specific particular plans are, but I would encourage you to follow up on them, especially if it's altruistic, if you're intending to help people as opposed to, you know, scare people.
Oh, right. I mean, open eyes. Let
Right.
people see that
Right.
a positive influence doesn't have to come from the government. It can come from people who are looking out, you know, for their fellow man, so to speak.
Yeah, the only drawback I would say is that people that get into the condition thinking that we have to wait for Arnold Schwarzenegger to swoop in and save us. There are a segment of the population that believe that superhero has to come in and save them. So if they start looking, you know, too much at the Alex Joneses of the world and people like that to say, oh, well, Alex has got it covered. I don't have to do anything. He's got it well taken care of. We're in good hands. He's fighting the good fight. We're all good. You know, people are going to take that laissez-faire, carefree attitude, and that's part of our demise, in my estimation. That's going to bring our downfall if we can't individually take some responsibility. But I commend you for at least even just considering it. You know what I mean? So I do thank you for your call, and have a nice evening. Take care. Okay, I don't have much time to take any more calls. I'm going to have to wrap this up quickly, but I do thank everyone out there for taking the time to view this evening. Chris Athanas will not be here for the next 2 weeks, so please enjoy some classic Reality Expander coming up. I'd like to thank my producer, Chris, for commanding the helm of the Starship Esoterica, and to remind folks that tomorrow, on the 19th, at Opal Divines, is our philosophical meeting. Jeff Contreras and myself are hosting, starting around 8 o'clock onwards. This is at 700 West 6th Street, the corner of 6th and West, and everyone's invited. If you have any interest in the metaphysical, please come down and join us, and thanks, Austin. Have a nice evening.